My name is Lisa Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington State Microenterprise Association. And I'm really pleased to welcome all of you today to this powerful conversation with speakers from around the country to really talk about the power of cooperatives to build community wealth. And many of you have seen other programs that WSMA has put on, from local investment networks to opening up clean materials and other training workshops and training programs for microenterprises. But this is really a critical part of our business development ecosystem here in Washington. And I wanted to just take a little bit of time to introduce you to WSMA. So Washington State Microenterprise Association has been around for more than 15 years. Our work really focuses on helping nonprofits around Washington State build their capacity to help the very smallest businesses grow with training, technical assistance, microlending, and other support. And what we know is that we're involved in supporting very small businesses, but cooperatives are a critical part of that piece. We've been partnering with the Northwest Cooperative Development Center for several years to make sure that that's possible and more effective. And it's out of that relationship and the work that we've been able to do with Ted Howard that we felt as though creating this opportunity for all of these partners to come together is really important. So WSMA, just for your background, is working on capacity building. So we do training and technical assistance. We are connecting the dots for nonprofits around the country, around the state, to the resources they need. And they also provide small grants and networking. So without further ado, I want to just make sure that you mute yourself and that you put your questions and answers either in the chat box or in the Q&A. We also want to make sure you know that we're recording today, and we'll be posting this on our website in the future. So let me just see, I don't think there are any questions in there, but I would love to introduce you to Ted Howard, who is a giant in the world of cooperatives and hails from the Democracy Collaborative, and really has been pivotal in creating avenues for cooperatives to grow and for systems to be open and supporting of cooperatives. He's a co-author of The Making of a Democratic Economy. And without further ado, let's give him a round of applause. And welcome, Ted.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I think when you said giant, you meant that I'm 6'5" in height. That's the only giant I am. Well, welcome everybody. We have a terrific program today. As Lisa said, I'm Ted Howard, co-founder and president of the Democracy Collaborative. I'm going to set the stage for what we'll talk about, and then I will introduce our panelists and moderate the conversation for you. The Democracy Collaborative, excuse me, we're 21 years old now. We began at the University of Maryland at College Park, but we're an independent nonprofit organization now. We consider ourselves an action-oriented think tank and a kind of R&D laboratory for what we call the democratic economy. And where the democratic economy begins is really what we're talking about today: community wealth building and the crucial role of cooperatives in building wealth in our communities. This idea of community wealth building works to produce broadly shared economic prosperity and stronger local economies on the basis of greater democratic ownership, participation, and control over productive capital, assets, business. It's a new way of thinking about business, really. It's a new way of thinking about economic development, poverty alleviation, and wealth creation and accumulation for families. There are many types of structures and mechanisms that can build community wealth anchored in our communities. These include employee-owned companies, community land trusts, public enterprise, public banks, social enterprise, and much more. All of it rooted in community, broadly owned by different publics, and keeping money and wealth local and circulating where we live. Today, we're going to focus on one particular form of wealth building structure, and that is cooperatives. And we truly have, among our panel, many decades of experience in the cooperative sector at all different levels. So you're in for a real treat. Just a few words about cooperatives for those of you who may not be very familiar with them or only familiar with your local food co-op. Cooperatives exist in virtually all sectors of our economy. Through credit unions, co-ops are in the banking sector. There are agricultural co-ops, electricity generation and transmission, telecom, healthcare, housing, childcare, retail, and purchasing cooperatives owned by groups of independent businesses. In every case, cooperatives operate on the basis of a core democratic principle of one person, one vote. The members of the co-op are the owners of that company, each and every one having an individual and equal share. Now, for a sector of its size, cooperatives actually have a fairly low visibility in some ways in the United States, although that profile is growing and growing dramatically. I've worked in this field in various ways for 15 years now, and I've seen an explosion of interest in cooperatives in communities and cities all over this country. Let me share a few facts, a few statistics before I introduce our panel. According to the National Cooperative Bank, in 2019, the top 100 revenue generating co-ops in the United States earned $228 billion. And in total, the cooperatives across the country, that sector, possess upwards of $3 trillion in assets. So this is not a marginal part of the economy. This is a very important part of our economy. And co-ops employ about 2 million Americans in various jobs in the cooperative sector. There are an estimated more than 60,000 distinct cooperatives in the United States. And very interestingly, to me at least, they have a total of 120 million members. That is members of everything from outdoor companies like REI that you'll be familiar with, that's consumer co-ops, members of credit unions, members of worker co-ops, and so forth. In other words, 1 out of every 3 Americans is a member of a cooperative. So this is very mainstream in the United States. Today, our panel is going to focus largely, but not exclusively, on a particular form of cooperative, that is a worker cooperative, a co-op in which everyone who is an employee is an owner of the company. In my experience, worker cooperatives are intensely entrepreneurial. It's just that rather than one entrepreneur as the owner of a company in a more traditional form, in a cooperative, we have a collectivity of entrepreneurs all working and pulling together to build a successful business. Now, some of these worker co-ops, such as those in the Evergreen Cooperative Network in Cleveland, Ohio, began as startups. Brett Jones, who's with us today and will be speaking shortly, is one of the leaders of the Evergreen Cooperative Network. Last week, and by the way, I know we have some friends from Amarillo, Texas on this webinar today. And the reason I know that is because I was in Amarillo a few days ago. And I visited the panhandle of Texas for the ribbon cutting of a new cooperative laundry that will eventually have more than 100 worker owners. In both the Cleveland and Amarillo examples, the co-ops were catalyzed by a group of civic leaders in City Hall, within philanthropy, within community-based banks, anchor institutions, and neighborhood associations, and done explicitly as a wealth building strategy to address poverty and create economic opportunity in low-income areas. In other words, these are co-ops with both a business purpose and a social mission. In other cases, we find cooperatives of maybe 5 people or 10 people who have come together and put in their own capital, their own money to start a business, not necessarily to address poverty or for that kind of mission, but very simply because they prefer to work for themselves and run their own business and share in the profits. These co-ops might be bakeries, bicycle repair shops, food stores, on and on. I know Diane Gassaway, who's with us, has worked with many such co-ops here in the Pacific Northwest, where most of you are listening. And then another set of co-ops, worker co-ops, result when a local business owner decides to retire and works with co-op specialists, some of the people on this panel you'll be hearing from, to transition ownership to employees by converting to a cooperative. In other words, it's their exit strategy. And both Shevanthi Daniel and Allison Lingane have been involved in these conversions, as has Brett Jones in Cleveland. So with that background, I'd like to introduce our panel. And we'll begin by having each panelist speak for 5 to 7 minutes about their particular work. Some will be using slides, unlike me, and also some of what they find most exciting in their work and impactful in terms of the growth of the cooperative sector. So I'd like, I'll just introduce them by name and then they'll introduce themselves and they'll speak in this order. At the end of that, I'll ask a few questions to get dialogue going, and then please put questions in the chat box and we'll be referring to those so we can have an interaction. So our first presenter will be Shevanthi Daniel, Senior Program Director at the Democracy at Work Institute. Brett Jones will follow. He's the Director of Evergreen Cooperative Business Services in Cleveland with the co-ops, and Senior Vice President of the Fund for Employee Ownership, which I'm sure he'll tell you about. Next, Allison Lingane, co-founder of Project Equity. And our final speaker who will bring us home is Diane Gassaway, as I mentioned, Executive Director of the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. So with that, Shevanthi, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks there, Ted. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see some familiar names on the list. I am eager to connect with you. My name is Shevanthi Daniel, and I'm with the Democracy at Work Institute, DOWI for short. We are based out of California and New York, Oakland and New York. Our staff are located remotely. I'm actually on the West Coast in Seattle. Our mission is to expand the promise of worker cooperatives to those locked out and most directly affected by social and economic inequality. So we study co-op models and we find what's innovating and replicable, and we bring those to cities around the country. So we're a national organization. We have programs that work directly with cities and institutions that are looking to build deep roots and supports for cooperatives. We also work with technical assistance providers around the country to aggregate lessons learned and data so that we're tracking the impacts that we're having on businesses that have converted to cooperatives or that have started a cooperative more recently. We're partnered with the Federation, the US Federation of Worker Cooperatives. We actually were founded by them and continue to work in close proximity, building the field, doing education and research work. Thanks, Ted. Glad to be here.
Brett Jones, would you like to go next, Brett? Oh, Shevanthi, are you continuing with this?
Oh,
I'm not advancing the slides, actually. Cherie's got a handle on that.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Do you want to
Yeah,
continue?
Shevanthi, why don't you continue and go through your slides, and then we'll just do it as a presentation, then we'll go to Brett.
Okay, excellent.
Good.
No problem. Thanks, Cherie. If you can advance it 2 slides over. Excellent. So as Ted mentioned, next slide, we'll give a general understanding of what cooperatives are. These are the 3 main forms that most people are familiar with: consumer, producer, and worker cooperatives. And we see various types of cooperatives. And so when I thought about you all as the audience, focusing on micro enterprises and small businesses, I thought about which model works best for you and might be most appealing. And so I want to just flag that these are some of the most common ones, but I'll be focusing on secondary cooperatives. Next slide. Thank you. And the secondary co-ops are businesses made up of pre-existing microenterprises. So essentially, it's in this approach to cooperative development, a developing organization incubates a cooperative, but it's not necessarily a worker cooperative made up of individuals. It is a secondary cooperative made up of pre-existing small micro businesses. This is also known as a shared services co-op. Secondary co-op model can strengthen small micro businesses and sole proprietorships by aggregating their financial power. The purpose of the secondary co-op is most commonly to do shared marketing of products and services, or to have shared purchasing of goods and services. So essentially it meets the needs of the business members that are part of that cooperative. This model does have the potential to be used intentionally to foster racial equity and community wealth building. The vast majority of businesses that you all work with are owned by people of color, and they are oftentimes micro or very small businesses. So the first point of intervention for shared ownership strategies could be this lighter touch model, which is strengthening the existing micro enterprise by bringing them together and building financial power across common industry or common region that businesses are shared on. The next slide will give us some example case studies. So I picked a couple different examples of sort of local homegrown organizations, as well as some national brands. So Ace Hardware is probably the most common form that you all are familiar with. Ace Hardware stores are all independently owned and operated. The stores join Ace Cooperative and get better prices and access to goods that they will then sell in their stores. This is a purchasing cooperative. The hardware store all sort of own this entity together, and if the returns from the profit are once the profits have been made, the hardware stores, Ace Hardware, all of the members benefit and share in that profit. Organic Valley is another very well-known brand name. It was started by farmers and is a cooperative of milk producers, dairy farmers who are all selling their milk to the cooperative, which then packages it and brands it as Organic Valley. This essentially helps small farmers help access markets and sell to across the country, right? So this is a producer cooperative, and again, they are sharing in some element of the cooperative business that meets their business needs, right? So the smaller, more homegrown example is Si Se Puede. It started, it's actually not small anymore. It's quite substantial. It's based out of New York and was started by the Center for Family Life. This is a good example of what might be the micro businesses that you all work with perhaps. But Center for Family Life incubated Si Se Puede. It's a cooperative of independent house cleaners who have come together to pool money for back office services and client management services. So the cleaners all contribute a percentage of what they make to the cooperative, which then handles the client-facing work. All members have to meet certain quality and training standards. They may also market their services together by investing in materials and technology like a website or an app. This is a marketing cooperative and could be utilized to aggregate the financial power and ability to scale these small businesses in a community. Another example that isn't featured here is a company called Co-Rise out of Chicago, incubated by the ICA group. These are all in-home childcare providers. This organization is fairly new, but there's some material on the ICA website that I'd encourage you all to look at. But a secondary co-op could also be used to organize minority-owned small construction companies, manufacturing companies, landscaping companies. So anywhere where you have individual sole proprietors smaller than, say, three or two people working in that company, it could be formed into a shared cooperative, shared services cooperative, where you aggregate other businesses of the like industry. So in this example of the shared cooperative or secondary cooperative model, the entrepreneur is really the developer organization. It's usually a nonprofit or an enterprise that specifically helps and aids businesses to grow. This model, when done well, can have substantial impact. By increasing market access and or cutting costs, it can boost financial performance of member businesses and particularly help businesses reach larger markets or anchor institutions. So when you think about your small mom and pop shop, they're not going to get a contract with the city, right? The municipality. They'll only be able to do it if they're able to aggregate their business power with other like businesses and then bid on larger projects. So this is the strategy behind this model. Next slide. I'll go through very briefly actually next one. I don't want to take up too much time on this, but I want to flag here that in a secondary co-op model, there is a bit of development work that's necessary. And generally we estimate about 6 months lead time to just begin the research and understand the industry that might need the support. So really when you're creating this cooperative, you want to be able to address the pain point of a group of businesses. And then these businesses become the members of the cooperative. And essentially that groundwork that you do to understand the market need is going to be the basis that launches the cooperative. And that generally takes about 6 months. And then you're into about a year of training and developing those members as they join onto the cooperative and build relationships across company to company. Next slide. I think that might be the last slide. And this is a quick snapshot of the timeline around the research feasibility, the model development, and relationship building. The bulk of this work, the most that it will cost is really in the front end, the research and business planning and marketing stage of the business. By year 2, 3, and 4, depending on the interest that the developer might have in this cooperative, they want to transition ownership over time to the smaller businesses. So in that period of time, there will be a lot of education. It could be dovetailed with existing business support and our education programs. And I have a few other examples, but I'll stop there so I don't take too much time on this presentation.
Thank you, Shevanthi. That was wonderful. And someone already asked if they could ask questions about the presentation. I think what we'll do is go through all 4. So please hold your questions for now. Put them in the Q&A box if you want, and we'll ask them. Let's go to Brett Jones of the Evergreen Cooperative Network in Cleveland, Ohio. So Brett, 7 minutes or so from you, please.
I will do my best to keep it to 7. A lot to unpack here. First, let me shout out Amarillo team, likely the newest worker cooperative in the country. Awesome stuff. Let me also say that this panel that I am on with, the folks who are on this panel are some of the most respected people in my world of employee ownership. I mean, I absolutely love the work that all of you are doing, and so it's an honor to be here. Real quick, I'll go through this and Evergreen. And so we're structured a little bit differently in that we are critically so sometimes. We're a top-down organization in that we form worker cooperatives for people who aren't necessarily thinking about being in worker cooperatives or thinking about having jobs. And so this model of ours is really around promoting wealth, building opportunities for a specific set of residents in Cleveland so that we're anchoring the capital, launching new green initiatives, stabilizing neighborhoods, and developing a model for national impact. And so we really have this two-pillar approach. And I don't know if this thing in the way. We have this two-pillar approach. One is our anchor-based strategy. And so that's how we got started. We were working with anchor institutions to redirect their spend to locally owned companies, and particularly to companies located in this low to moderate income neighborhood called Greater University Circle neighborhood. The median household income is $18,500 there. And so what we were able to do is we were able to really partner those institutions with these businesses, locate the businesses there, and have the employees work there. And then our 2.0 strategy, so the anchor-based strategy, the 1.0 strategy is all about startup, right? Dollars in, start from scratch. Our 2.0 strategy gives us a little bit of gas in the gas tank and allows us to grow faster. And it's where we have our TFEO. It's where we acquire companies, convert them to employee-owned, and then support them in our network of employee-owned companies. So again, we're in 7 specific neighborhoods with our 1.0 model, 50,000 residents, median household income. And the crux of the matter for the anchor institutions and for philanthropy and civic engagements and folks like the Democracy Collaborative all came together and said, look, a job is not enough. And locating the businesses in the community, having sole proprietorships or partnerships own them and then hire people wasn't enough impact. And so we really wanted to figure out how do we get more economic impact? And that really came through the worker cooperative model. So it was an all hands on deck strategy. The city of Cleveland was an amazing partner for us in this one. The Cleveland Foundation was also an amazing partner. And then it was our anchor institutions, our hospitals and our education institutions that helped out with that. So in 2009-10, we started our first 2 companies, Evergreen Cooperative Laundry and Evergreen Energy Solutions. Evergreen Cooperative Laundry does a bunch of healthcare laundry, right? It's a healthcare industrial laundry, very similar to the one started in Amarillo, Texas. And then Evergreen Energy Solutions is a energy efficiency company. We realized that we needed to be able to funnel philanthropic dollars down to the worker cooperative. So we started Evergreen Cooperative Corporation. And then we also realized that, hey, we need a centralized business offices. And so we started Evergreen Business Services. And after all that, we said, all right, we're moving along pretty good at a clip here. And we started Green City Growers, which is the nation's largest urban hydroponic greenhouse. It's 3.25 acres under glass, produces about 300,000 heads of lettuce a month. And so those are these 3, ECL, E2S, and GCG, were our first cooperatives. We all started them from scratch. They were all in our 1.0 model. 2013, I joined the team along with our current CEO to really help the cooperatives function less like programs developed in philanthropic coffers and really bring them into the marketplace and have them focus on P&L profitability and really running like businesses. We did our first profit sharing event in 2014. So you can see it took us a little bit to really get going here and, not tooting anybody's horn, but, we started in 13. We were able to turn things around, start sharing some profits in 14. 2018, Evergreen Cooperative Laundry took over the facility for Cleveland Clinic. And then in 2018, we started the Fund for Employee Ownership, which is where I'll try to spend most of my time. But you'll see 3 other logos here, Phoenix Coffee, Berry Insulation, and Intellitronics. These are 3 companies that were previously owned by an individual or a set of individuals that we acquired from the retiring owner, converted to employee owned, and then now we support in our portfolio of companies. And the one that's really interesting from a micro enterprise standpoint is Berry Insulation. It was about 12 people when we acquired it. They've since grown to about 22 people and are continuing to grow. But this notion of acquiring companies and converting them to employee owned works, and it also works in the micro enterprise space. And so this is a very technical slide, probably don't want to spend too much time here, but this is how our cash flows, right? We rely heavily on philanthropy to connect with our mission and support what we do. And so we have unrestricted funds, which can really be used for programming and support for the employees. And then we have restricted funds, which are really the investment dollars that go into the cooperatives. And so you'll see there that the Fund for Employee Ownership is on the restricted side because the dollars we get are really for acquisition only. Profitability is paramount. For us to really execute our wealth building model, we have to be generating profits. Otherwise, how are you going to help folks build wealth? what we learned very quickly was that you need to have people who know the business running the businesses. And that was one of the things that we did when we first got there, was we really made sure that we had strong leaders in position. The anchor model is huge. And oftentimes what you'll find, and even in the micro enterprise space, to Shevanthi's point, is if you collaborate with other micro enterprises, that you can attract the attention of anchor institutions and have them redirect their spend. But I would even imagine that if you seek the conversation correctly, the anchor institutions would even be working with micro enterprises. Cooperative structure should be a destination, not a restrictive requirement. Higher margin businesses and no ceiling. So one of the things that we realize is that if you work in the laundry today, there's only so many positions available in the laundry. And so what does your career ladder look like? Oftentimes folks career ladder out of our cooperatives because they've built a job history and a skill set that allows them to be to apply for other jobs and really be attractive to other employers. And so and then the notion of moving between cooperatives. So if you work at laundry today and there's a management position available at one of our other cooperatives, certainly we're combing our landscapes to figure out how to promote internally. So we're now at about 300 total employees. 63% of them are Cleveland residents, 64% are minority, and 40% are reentry. And we have a home buying program as a part of our entire ecosystem. We try to do more than just provide a job. We realize that having a job is important, but if you have housing instability, that could really disrupt your ability to perform at work and be a part of an engaging workplace. And a lot of our the folks that we employ did and do have housing challenges, and so we thought having a home ownership program would be really beneficial. We've got some media here, and again, this presentation will be available. But and I didn't really unpack a lot about the Fund for Employee Ownership, so I'll just do that really quickly. Those are philanthropic dollars that came in that allow us to form new companies, capitalize those companies, and have those companies buy the assets of existing companies. And so as you think about how to really stand up the micro enterprise worker cooperative space, there are funds like ours and others across the country that can really help with this acquisition piece, and acquisition and conversion. And so, and if you're a micro enterprise that has recently become a worker cooperative, there are dollars available for you to grow as a micro enterprise and maybe acquire other micro enterprises. And so, again, we operate companies, and so our focus is always getting control and then getting people engaged. And very happy to be here. I hope that was 7 minutes or less. Pop, I appreciate it.
That was perfect, Brett. Thank you so much. And we'll go now to Allison Lingane of Project Equity. Allison.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I just want to really thank everyone and underscore and echo what Brett said about the group of folks in this conversation today, all folks who I just have tremendous respect for, and really glad to be a part of the conversation. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Okay, can everyone see that okay? So Project Equity, so I'm the co-founder of Project Equity, and really our vision, what we're in this work for, is focused on employee ownership, of which worker co-ops are a part. And that, we see employee ownership as this best kept secret, like very few people know about it. And Ted shared those stats about cooperatives broadly. It's kind of the same thing. Like there is it going on, but it's very siloed and people don't know about it. And so organizationally, we're in this because not only strengthens small businesses, but really builds wealth for low-wage workers and communities of color. Excuse me. And, we focus on what I would call building the market. How do we build the market for employee ownership, advanced systems change, so that can enable supports for employee ownership to be embedded in private markets, in small business support organizations, within government, and strengthened by policy. And we also do very hands-on work, similar to what Brett was talking about in terms of transitioning companies. Our model is slightly different, but same in concept. We identify small businesses that could be candidates for employee ownership and help them become worker co-ops or ESOPs or other forms. So I want to really call out and lift up a leader in the state of Washington alongside, of course, the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. You're going to hear from Diane Gassaway on this panel. But the Whatcom Community Foundation is working towards lifting up and supporting employee ownership to move towards a state center. And they're located in Bellingham, Washington, and the Washington SBDC there is also supporting that effort. So happy to share more about that if folks are interested. So why does this matter? Well, you know, the silver tsunami is what's dubbed as the baby boomer retirement wave. And we know that nationally, an estimated 1 out of every 2 businesses is owned, 1 out of every 2 businesses with employees is owned by a baby boomer. And so as boomers, you know, advance, you know, further, more of them retire, we have just this huge risk that our small and small businesses, you know, small up to 500 employees, so small is a broad range of sizes, but that our small businesses are really at risk, that we need to preserve our local economies and our local small businesses. And the reality is that if you flip that around, it's also an opportunity for us to create the kinds of businesses that have the outcomes, you know, that I'm going to share some outcomes, but that we're all talking about on this conversation, that deconcentrate wealth, actually spread the wealth more broadly to the workers in those companies. Now, in the state of Washington, and back to the Whatcom Community Foundation, so they commissioned a study that is available on our website if folks are interested in poking around, that looks at what the impact is across the state and in the different counties. You know, we estimate that nearly 60,000 businesses in the state of Washington are owned by baby boomers, and they account for over $100 billion of small business revenue. So again, this is not a small issue. Like, this is a major issue within the state economy and also a major opportunity for us in terms of worker co-ops and employee ownership. So I just wanted to share a quick story. This is a client of ours, a business that happened to be in California, but that really shows us the strength of worker co-ops. So Cal Solar, they're a solar design and installation company, and they're about 40 workers. They're 100% employee owned, organized as a worker co-op. When COVID hit, they furloughed all of their employees so that they could access unemployment. Now, in a normal company, you would expect furloughed companies to, you know, furloughed workers, right? You're on unemployment, like you're not showing up at work. But for this group of people, this company, it's their livelihood, it's their jobs, they own it. So they came together and came up with actually a brand new line of business, which in their case was battery storage for solar energy. And they became a reseller, and they were able to get this new line of business launched during the pandemic while on furlough, and you know, brought everyone back. They actually grew their staff, met their annual projections, and were able to give themselves raises of north of 20%. So, you know, the story really highlights what we talk about when we say that worker co-ops is a group of people coming together and sharing their ingenuity, and they're in it, you know, they make the businesses stronger because that's where their livelihoods come from, and that's how they you know, build wealth as a team together. You know, we asked this question, like, what would America look like? What would the state of Washington look like if every workplace built worker wealth in the same way? This is another story from a client of ours, a slice of New York. They distributed over $500,000 in profits to about 30 workers over a period of 2 years. You know, very, very meaningful profit sharing that happened. This happened right before the pandemic in a sector that, of course, you know, a pizza business was really hard hit, you know, by the stay-at-home order. So you can imagine the impact that profit sharing had. So, you know, what are worker co-ops? Just briefly, you know, democratic governments, the board of directors is elected and made up of the majority, elected by the whole base of worker owners and made up by the majority of worker owners. You know, the size is often a question we get, you know, how big does a company need to be? You can have worker co-ops that are smaller than 10 employees. In the work that we do, which is supporting existing companies to transition that 10 employee threshold is sort of a floor, but it can go all the way up. Thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of workers can be in a worker-owned co-op. So it's really a universal model that can fit all business sizes and all industries, essentially. So, very, very briefly, what does this mean for a business? This is a purchase of the business, a sale of the business, if you will. So a retiring owner might be selling the business. The business takes out the loan. So people often say, oh, well, the employees don't have the money to buy the company, but it's the business that's taking out the loan based upon their own cash flow history. And then the loan is paid back over time through future profits. So think of it this way. The employees are buying the business with the profit that their labor creates. The work that we do at Project Equity is to support companies. This is our 4 phases of support, but we basically work with businesses over a period of, 3-4 years, sometimes longer, to support this transition and make it be successful. And the longest time period of that 3-4 years is in our Thrive, this last step 4, where this is post transactions. The business is now owned by the employees. And so we really support that group of people to step into those roles as owners, to thrive so the business can thrive as an employee-owned company, and they as employee owners. Let's see here. Just want to quickly share, readiness factors. So I talked about this size threshold for a worker co-op. If you're bigger than 10, more like 40, you can look at other models like ESOPs. But this is a great model for companies that have a profitable track record, taking COVID into account, of course, established business with years of experience. And, if there are companies that are smaller than 10, that doesn't mean that you can't start planning now, right? You've got your own growth strategy, and you can incorporate an ownership or a worker co-op transition into your future plans. So I will leave it at that, and just have my contact information up here on the screen, and I'll stick it in the chat as well.
It was terrific, Allison. Thank you so much. Just on a personal basis, I remember when Allison and her colleague Hilary Bell were forming Project Equity, and the first sort of sitting around dinner tables and hearing your plans, and to see how far you've come in such a short period of time is really, really impressive. So I'd like to now turn to Diane Gassaway. They're in Washington State to tell us about her work, and then we'll go through some questions, and a number of them coming in from those of you who've been using the Q&A box. But first, Diane, please.
Thanks, Ted, and thank you, WSMA, for holding this event. I just want to caution everyone quickly. I've lost connection several times during the presentation so far, so hopefully I'll be able to stay on. I have a few slides, and I'll start sharing that now. So we've heard why cooperatives are important. Cooperative businesses, they keep resources local, they provide for jobs, they give owners an equal voice in the business, often providing for better pay and benefits, and are less likely to leave a community. NWCDC, or the Northwest Cooperative Development Center, provides cooperative development education and technical assistance. We help guide people through the process of establishing their businesses that are rooted in the community and in democratic governance. You've heard about what co-ops are, what the processes are for forming cooperatives and why they're important. But there are few live resources to turn to for cooperative development.
Oh,
I think she is frozen.
yeah, we seem to have lost Diane here. Oh, there you are. You're back,
Yeah.
Diane, please.
Am I back?
Yes,
You
and
are.
if you could advance your slides too, that'd be great.
Well, Diane's frozen again, unfortunately. So. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
perhaps-
maybe,
Mhm. Yes, Lisa.
maybe, yeah, if Diane, is she here? If she can turn off her video, that might help a lot. Diane?
So
If you
I
turn
think
off
I'm
your
back.
yeah, great. If you turn off your video, you'll have better bandwidth.
Okay, so I'm going to turn off my video.
Great.
We'll see what happens there. And I'm going to try and share screen again. Okay,
Good.
so 20 years ago, I discovered cooperatives and the power of self-help through group action. It transformed my thinking about corporations and opened up a world of possibilities. It's become my life's work, and it's truly remarkable to witness the transformation that occurs when people become business owners and take control over their futures, whether it's through creating jobs, accessing critical goods and services, or securing housing. It's inspiring to see the importance of community rise to the top rather than profits. Yes, cooperatives are businesses though, and they need to turn a profit, but not at the expense of the people they serve, who are their member owners. NWCDC provides a lot of different services, from education to feasibility research, to access to supplemental business development services like valuations, accounting, and legal assistance by professionals who understand the cooperative business model. I've learned over the years that the cooperative business model is incredibly flexible and accommodating, yet with this flexibility comes complexity, which I believe has deterred some business professionals from pursuing the cooperative business model. It's our hope at NWCDC that professionals such as yourselves come to appreciate the opportunity cooperative business models provide through shared risk and begin to incorporate them into your array of options. NWCDC has a staff of 10 cooperative development specialists, including myself. At any one time, we have approximately 80 projects going on. These projects span the spectrum of business sectors. Currently, they seem to be leaning most heavily towards housing, small business cooperative conversions, home care startups, and ventures that are combining housing, agriculture, and related worker co-ops. Additionally, we've had an uptick in inquiries about childcare cooperatives. In practice, just about any business is potentially a cooperative business. Since COVID-19, the interest in forming cooperatives has definitely picked up. Before the pandemic, we received about 3 to 5 inquiries a month, and now it's about 3 to 5 inquiries a week. The NWCDC board is also deeply committed to the cooperative model and represents communities where we work around the Northwest. NWCDC serves the 3-state region of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And over the years, we've learned that cooperative ventures that find us versus those that are initiated as top-down projects are easier and have a greater likelihood of success. I believe this has to do with conversations that groups have prior to reaching out to NWCDC so that they have a shared understanding of the cooperative business model and a vision of their future. That said, there's plenty of scenarios where we are the initiators, particularly with manufactured home community conversions and home care worker co-ops. These are 2 very different approaches, but each has a unique aspect that requires NWCDC to be the initiator. In the manufactured home community conversion, this is a real estate transaction, and NWCDC initiates the purchase and sale agreement. In a home care cooperative startup, NWCDC is the community organizer, educating caregivers about the opportunity to combine their efforts. In all cases, whether they're grassroots or top-down, businesses practice due diligence, which includes understanding their markets, conducting feasibility research, building business plans, and creating governance and operational policies. We also assist with accessing capital, and at times are the lender of working capital ourselves. Am I still with you?
Yes, but it would be
Okay.
great if you advanced your slides.
Well, actually, I don't have too many. But where I'm headed is that NWCDC, in addition to providing one-on-one advising, we're also convening academies. And we have 2 planned for this year. One started last week, serving the Island and San Juan counties. We have a second planned for this fall in Olympia. These workshops are approximately 10 weeks long and go through all of the various aspects of starting a cooperative and the skill sets required to sustainably manage them. We also just concluded a workshop series on Inclusion Includes You and have a trainer cohort that will be sharing best practices over the next 12 months. And that was compliments of the Washington State Microenterprise Association. For several years, we've convened gathering of local cooperatives in the South Sound region to highlight the impact of cooperatives in our local communities. And beginning this fall, we'll be working with the Evergreen State College to conduct a certificate of co-op management and development. And last but not least, I'd like to highlight that the National Cooperative Business Association / CLUSA Impact Conference is in October. This is a hybrid model this year. So last year was the first year they held it virtually. It was excellent. And I encourage folks to participate if you have any inkling to have a greater understanding of the cooperative movement in the United States. So here's a few pictures of some of the co-ops that we work with, and they represent construction, bakery, resale clothing, home care, and manufactured housing. I understand that manufactured housing is not a sector that the microenterprise associations pursue much, but for us, it represents affordable housing that's critical to the workforce. Recently, we had a young woman who was the daughter of a resident-owned community president, board director. When the community converted to resident ownership, she was in her teens. She now has her own home in that community and was just recently hired by a home care cooperative to be their administrator. Technology is another area that we hear from, and another retail establishment. We're also engaged in agriculture and another cafe that's a worker-owned business. And then just a few more, the Okanagan Producers Marketing Association over in Eastern Washington, and Siskiyou Sustainable Co-op, that's a multi-stakeholder CSA in Southern Oregon, Circle of Life, one of the cooperative caregiving cooperatives that we work with, and Business Services Cooperative, which is really unique here in the Olympia area. Business Services Cooperative was born out of the need of all of the various cooperatives in our area for bookkeeping services. So they are now serving most of the cooperatives in the area that we work with. And I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks everyone who's presented. We have about half an hour for questions. Let me say that people have been asking for our email addresses and so forth. We've put them in the chat, but I think WSMA will get those out along with the video of the presentation, along with the PowerPoints that people have been using. So all of that will come to you as a package. And as you could tell from the presentations, there's just a lot of experience that can be accessed by all of you to help you if you want to start on an employee ownership cooperative journey. And it's always a journey. One of the questions areas that's come up from a couple people, so I'll throw this to our group and anyone can answer and talk back and forth, is around just the issue of capital to be able to form these co-ops is philanthropic capital of the kind that was used by Evergreen and also down in Amarillo by the North Heights Linen Service, the new cooperative laundry there. Are you all finding, is that generally available? Our community foundation's interested in this. I know in Amarillo, actually there was participation from 5 or 6 community-based banks who were supportive of the cooperative down there, which is very interesting, I think. Anchor institutions have put money in, but what's your experience and advice for people about where to access capital for the growth of cooperatives, the cooperative sector? Who would like to be the first to take that?
Yeah, I don't mind tackling that one. So we've, the Cleveland Foundation is place-based and it's geographically focused. And I think when you're looking at developing cooperatives early on, I think that's your best source of capital, right? We didn't, we haven't really worked with a ton of national funders, but we have worked with some. But I think your greatest successes are in the community banks. CDFIs are a great place to take a look at accessing capital. I'd focus on local place-based organizations that really care about the residents and care about the well-being of the folks in that community.
Allison, for the work you do, is especially the conversion work, is the capital come from the company actually taking out a loan or putting in money to do this work?
Yeah, so this conversion, as I mentioned, is a sale of the business, and so the original owner who's selling their share is paid for their life's work for this business, and typically there's 2, sometimes 3, but to keep it simple, 2 loans. One is the seller actually stays in for 30 or 40% of that transaction, so it's $1 million transaction, right? They would have a loan for $300,000 or $400,000. And then the remaining part of that is an external loan. So they're typically not bank loans because banks don't really know what to do with cooperatives. Like you walk into a bank and they're like, well, which one of you 25 people is going to be the personal guarantor of this loan, right? So they're typically community development financial institutions or specialized loan funds that target employee ownership or worker co-ops. So in Project Equity's case, we have a joint initiative with a national CDFI called Shared Capital Cooperative that enables us to bring capital to transactions. And we are actually just launching a fund of our own as well that will enable us to do direct loans. And so then the question becomes, well, who's investing in those funds, right? So it's the kind of folks who are investing in CDFIs, impact investors, people who really understand, what we're talking about is creating impact, create change in the way the relationship between workers and capital and money and creating quality jobs. So it's the kind of investors that can be foundation investors, PRIs, it can be impact investors, family offices that are aligned with the mission that are really looking to put their money into the kind of change that cooperatives and employee ownership can bring.
Great. Shevanthi or Diane, do you have anything you'd like to add to the capital question?
Because of my instability, I'm just typing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So follow the chat box for Diane on capital.
I think Allison's answer was great. I have nothing to add. Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, it's it has hysterically, maybe that too. It has historically been one of the limitations of the expansion of the co-op sector, access to capital. But in fact, it seems in recent years, there's much more availability of capital. There are some national foundations, including the Candida Fund, that certainly funds perhaps all of us, or at least the majority of us on this call, has made money available for actual funds like the Fund for Employee Ownership and Cleveland, Ohio. There are other foundations that have been interested in this as well. I note that there's now some cities, New York City being one of them, I think Denver now is also, where in the municipal budget, there's a line item for cooperative development and the promotion of cooperatives. One of the interesting mechanisms that the Evergreen Cooperatives in Cleveland have, and again, the North Heights Linen Cooperative down in Amarillo, when it gets really up and running, is borrowed from Mondragon in Spain, which is the center of the sort of epicenter of worker cooperativism at scale, where tens of thousands of people are working in over 100 companies that they own with revenues in the 20 billion euro range. But one of the ways they access capital, one, they have their own bank, but two, cooperatives contribute 1% of their profits to fund controlled by the mothership of Mondragon, which can be used for R&D and development of additional co-ops. So there are many different ways to do this that are emerging now. And we're working at a policy level at the federal government to try to get departments like the Department of Housing and Urban Development to put money into this. And indeed, Evergreen accessed some HUD money as a loan when it first began, because it was creating jobs and business enterprises in very low income census tracts. I wanted to ask, I think for somebody who isn't involved in the cooperative field, there may be an inclination, because I've heard it, of, my gosh, running a small business or starting one is difficult enough. Why layer in this whole new ownership structure? And doesn't there have to be a very different company culture when you've got a cooperative or employee-owned business, and from just an individual entrepreneur who has 8 staff reporting to him or her that he or she's hired? And I wonder if you have some lessons you've learned about, is the cooperative, it has a lot of benefits, but is it also, in your view, an unwieldy kind of business strategy? Or do you find that it, in many ways, just works like any other business does? You just have to attend to some additional things. I see you nodding, Allison. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, and just as a frame, we don't do startups, so we don't have a lot of experience in the startup realm. But I want to share a comment that Blake Jones, who is a well known in the cooperative space, of Namaste Solar, something that he often says, which is, so Namaste Solar, at the time where he made these comments to me several years ago, there were about 100 people. They've grown since then. They're in 3, maybe 4 or 5 states at this point. So they're a good sized small business. And, what he said is, in our cooperative, it does take us more time to make important strategic decisions. However, once we make those decisions, we are all aligned and we are way faster on execution. So if you think about the time in a business combined of making new decisions and executing on the new decisions, we're faster, because that alignment is so strong once that decision gets made. So that, I think that's really telling. The other thing I will comment in is that, I mentioned that in a transition, a conversion of an existing business to a worker co-op, there's a floor of about 10 employees. Why does that floor exist? Why don't we go all the way down to, 3 or some number? And if you think about, like, Ted, you were talking about, that entrepreneur has 7 or 8 people reporting into her or him. You think about everything that happens in that entrepreneur's head versus a much larger business that has processes and systems and layers, and roles that are broken up and defined. In the smaller companies that we work with and help transition, part of that transition process is actually to get stuff out of the head and into a leadership team, get stuff out of that entrepreneur's head and into a board. Are there processes for doing an annual budget and reviewing financials quarterly. Does that process exist? In a lot of small business, it doesn't formally because the business owner just knows everything. They're on top of everything. It's at the size where it can all happen in their head. So, so that question of like, what's the right stage of a business to, if you're not starting up as a co-op, to transition is sort of like when you've got some basic layers and infrastructure in place is a great time to think about it. And for some companies, they can do that smaller than 10. For others, it's more like 20 employees, but that's kind of a critical question about what's the right time.
Thank you, Allison. It was wonderful. Brett, do you want to say anything about the building of a culture of ownership within the Evergreen cooperatives, which, you know, you started with some challenges, given that the workforce are primarily unemployed when hired and with many barriers to employment. And yet you're building a culture where people that are owners of the company need to understand, for instance, the balance sheet of the company. What kind of commitment to training you've been doing at Evergreen?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and it is a significant point. Quick story, we opened up our laundry and we handed the keys to a small team of folks who had been dubbed the initial employee owners. And within 5 minutes of getting the keys, they wanted to take a vote, and they wanted to vote for more paid time off and more raises. And the business hadn't done a stitch of laundry yet. So, that's just evidence of the fact that, you do need to do some education. And we spend we have a new office and a new division of Evergreen called Culture and Wealth Building. And, we've really focused, our attention on that office because we recognize that there was so much that needed to be in place to really support employee owners who are new. And so, although we may have seasoned employee owners that are there, guess what? We hire new folks, and after a year, they can become employee owners. And so the learning is continuous. And we use a system called open book management to help folks really understand what's going on in the P&L, take ownership of what's going on in the P&L, and really impact the bottom line. And so there's a system called the Great Game of Business that helps us really turn that into a fun exercise of managing the P&L. We have this really cool sort of financial literacy, I guess is what we would call it, financial literacy training program that helps folks unpack actually what's going on in the balance sheet, right? And unpack what's going on in the financials. And it also helps them with governance, right? Robert's Rules of Order, from a very simple, how do you vote and bring things to the board, but also what does it mean to be a board member? And what are your responsibilities as a board member? And so, yeah, the culture, it evolves constantly because despite being employee owned and profit sharing, we still have turnover. And so we're always fighting the culture battle, getting folks to help understand what it means to be an employee owner. But the good news is that we are now at a point where the employees are taking that responsibility themselves. And so when you have new people joining the cooperatives, it's oftentimes the culture is built in one-on-one conversations and one-on-one interactions, whether it be at a station or in a break room. The employees who are most seasoned that have been owners the longest often take that responsibility to ensure that we have a good culture. And then if we need to step in and help with some of the stuff, we do. But ultimately, we're operating companies, and we believe that, that's our number one goal, is to generate profits and operate those companies successfully. And then layer in this employee ownership piece and the culture and wealth building piece.
Great, Brett. Thank you. Thank you very much. Some questions are pouring in, so I'm going to refer to them. Let me first just, I mentioned our friends from Amarillo, Texas, who are on this call. I figured they were, apart from probably Brett, in Cleveland, they were the furthest away, but I want to give a shout out to our friends in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, who are, we at the Democracy Collaborative work with an organization in Belfast called Trademark. That's a trade union linked worker co-op. If you Google for trademarkbelfast.com, you'll see it. But they're working to build worker co-ops in Northern Ireland. And that really speaks to, this is a growing international phenomenon. In fact, the modern co-op movement, if you will, is not so modern. It began in 1844 in a town called Rochdale in Northern Ireland, which is near Manchester and Preston and the like. And the people there created initial set of principles of cooperativism, and they're called the Rochdale Pioneers. They're sort of the founders of this whole movement that we're talking about. If you look for them, it's a very fascinating history. So let me, let's see. So Dennis Comer, is it? Asked questions, and I guess, Brett, they're really directed to you. And you may want to answer them, perhaps. It was about the infrastructure costs of things. You may want to do this directly with Dennis. We're talking about a range of co-ops here. Some are, putting together a bicycle repair cooperative. That's a pretty low, capital cost and entry to get into that business. If you look at the North Heights Linen service that I just visited and told you about down in Amarillo, I think that was something like a $7 million capital raise. But the intention is that that's a company that hopefully will be in that community literally for generations, providing jobs. So there's a big range of capital. Do you, Shevanthi, I want to get you in the conversation. Do you have anything to say about that, or any of the observations that were being made about, is this cooperative farm, what makes it successful?
Yeah.
Besides having good customers that pay their bills on time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from the several things that have been brought up around the value add of a cooperative structure for the business side of things, I think one thing that didn't get mentioned is that, when you think about like a construction cooperative here in Seattle, Metis Construction as a 30-some person cooperative, when they converted, one of the main things they saw immediately improve, and Allison and Brett sort of brought this up, is worker engagement. The level of quality assurance went up when workers actually owned their business and had a say in what was happening with that business. They not only did they notice errors or things that maybe as a worker that was just getting a check, or a contractor that was coming in on a project that they may not have noticed or maybe even ignored. When they're an owner, the level of liability is higher, their ownership stake is important. And so it actually improved their level of engagement and participation in ensuring quality work product, which I think is a bottom line that all businesses want to meet. The other aspect of the business benefit is just retention. We've seen a lot of data and research coming out of the Rutgers Labor Center that show businesses are more able to be agile during times of economic downturn, while at the same time retaining jobs or cutting back on hours. So companies are able to be creative in those times like COVID, for instance, to really shapeshift and be agile with how they serve the needs of their business community. So that's one thing I'd love to add. And then, for several of you that are trying to figure out the how-to, the nuts and bolts of how do you get financing, how do you actually do the conversion, or what are the tools and trainings available, there are several organizations that have websites that are dedicated to archiving a library of tools, and the co-op sector in particular is a open source sector. And so you could definitely go to Project Equity's website. Dowie has a library, as well as the US Federation. I think those are the three that come to mind that actually have some specific tools or case studies. The other is a site called Becoming Employee Owned, which is aggregated stories and tools from all of the developers that have done this work around the country, from rural to urban centers. So you'll find various examples and tools there as well. So I'd recommend that you all check that out.
Thank you, Shevanthi. That was great to put those repositories of tools in front of us and make those available. I wanted to ask, let me see, I see there's in the Q&A box, there's something from Dennis. I would like to speak about a unique situation many cities will be dealing with and how co-ops could help. Is that something, Lisa, that we could, Dennis could do with us?
Definitely. I'll unmute him right now.
Great.
Dennis, I don't know if you are,
I'm unmuted. I can see you.
okay, can you hear him, everyone?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go for it, Dennis.
Okay, so the unique situation is I'm a community support organization, basically funded through a grant from the city, basically economic development and specific neighborhoods. The question is pretty much all volunteer, so nobody's getting paid. I am getting paid only because I'm the program manager keeping this stuff together. But for this co-op model, in an all volunteer organization, first of all, what's the infrastructure look like? So if the city says, hey, we're going to dump some money on you to build something that could help do this, what does that look like? That's my first question. The second question is, when I was talking about what's going to happen, there is a lot of ARPA money, a whole lot of money about recovery and all that kind of stuff that's coming, and they're looking at my organization because, for lack of a better word, transparent, great work at grassroots. And it's like, if we're going to give money to anybody, we're going to give it to these folks. I don't know what to do with all of that. And I don't know what to look for, because I don't know if our organization needs to go to co-op model, but I do have an opportunity to purchase buildings, or basically, let's put it this way. The city is looking to purchase commercial real estate and property that's willing to be developed in order to transfer ownership to BIPOC community residents. I'm like, how do I facilitate that? Is that a co-op model? It's like, if I get 3 businesses that want to go into the commercial retail space because the city bought it and is going to transfer it to me, what am I looking at to make that happen? Because that's a whole different business model from what I'm doing right now. And I'll leave it there. It's like, where do I start?
Dennis, I'm so glad you came, and
Good one.
excellent questions.
Do any of us have a thought on that? I mean, certainly Dennis is right. Through the Recovery Act, it's, what was it, 1.9 trillion or something. There's some very interesting money that can be accessed. We were able to work with the administration to there's a community sort of reinvestment foundation that's part of this that has $10 billion in it, which is just a small slice of the bigger. But we've been able to determine with them that that money can go into local economy preservation funds that can be buying local businesses from city governments and converting them. So there may be a source of information, but does anyone else on this panel know about this? Or if not, Dennis, I've put my email address in the chat, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and some of my staff offline. But anyone else on this?
I can jump in, Dennis. What I'm hearing is more money, more problems. And there will definitely be more money flowing into this work. And it's important to be mindful of the ecosystem you build. And so I think one is, gather all your partners, because you're going to need them, right? But secondarily, I think the tactics of, in particular with housing, which I don't have any expertise in, and I'd recommend maybe looking up Diane Gassaway and the work that they did with Rock USA, the residential owned housing. They, at least at minimum, will have some democratic governance and processes that residents can do to build community and build a shared understanding of what they're going into as co-owners, in terms of how you structure and manage that money and the inflow of that work. That's a layer of expertise that I can't bring into the conversation. But if you reached out, I could at least query my colleagues and figure out who I should point you to. Appreciate your question, Dennis.
So Dennis, you could be in touch with Shevanthi and or me if you'd like. Let me say we've got about 10 minutes to go. And I think I'd like to give in a couple minutes everybody among our panelists final opportunity for any reflection. But I did just want to presence, and it really builds off of what Dennis said about the, related to the BIPOC space. Certainly my experience has been, and I would like our panelists to talk about that, cooperatives are a very good tool that can be used to bring people into the economy who've been excluded systematically due to structural racism and multi-generational poverty and the sort of erosion of our core urban areas as well as rural areas. Certainly both in the Amarillo and Cleveland case, there's a high intention to hire returning citizens and bringing them into this space. And that, what we're talking about is finding a way not simply to give people, as Brett said, a job, which can help lift you out of poverty, but keep you out of poverty and begin to access economic opportunity by actually building wealth. And when you're an owner of a company and that company becomes profitable, that's a way to begin to not only get a salary and decent benefits, but actually access through profit sharing or any other like mechanism, patronage, distribution, so forth, a way to start to build your family's wealth and therefore your community's wealth. And I think particularly given, the data we've seen that, compared Black wealth to white wealth, and there's something like a $10 trillion gap. That's half of the gross domestic product of the country. So just any observations or reflections any of our panelists have about at this moment of racial reckoning for this country, and at a time when we have so many incarcerated people and finally some of them beginning to return to the community, how the co-op model might be particularly relevant. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm happy to jump in, and then I'd love to hear from others. I think from what I've seen of how cooperatives can unlock the ability for workers to organize and have power, unlike unions, right? Like unions do the same sort of thing, right? You as a worker get to form an opinion about your working conditions and negotiate with the powers that be. In a worker cooperative, that level of ownership is amped up even a little bit more. And so when you are talking about people that have been stripped historically and or are returning citizens, or immigrants, even dreamers that don't have access to jobs, cooperatives offer a creative way to bring in equity as part of a business model. And when I say, and I mean racial equity. And so that's what I find really powerful about the cooperative model, is that it centers workers right in a way, and then each cooperative has its sort of unique formula that it's able to create based on the needs of those workers. And so labor and workers are the center of that organization, while also at the same time providing good jobs, secure jobs, and well-paying jobs. So I think at least at the base level, but then I've also seen cooperative organizing happen where people are not necessarily creating businesses, but using models of cooperative and collectivized approaches to organized communities. And we've seen that in Jackson, Mississippi, and other areas where they're really just they're using the cooperative form to begin a dialogue about what power means and how to build power as a community. And I think that's a really fascinating space of work. I don't have as much tied to it, but you should do some research and look that up. There's definitely interesting study groups happening out of Nexus community, out of
St. Paul.
St. Paul, thank you. So there are folks like Allison, Brett, and Ted who've directly worked with them. So that's, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Shevanthi. I know we need to turn it over to Lisa for final words, but Brett, anything in 30 seconds you'd like to add by way of reflection?
Or a minute or two.
Or a minute or two.
Sorry,
You're
just
up,
getting off
Brett.
mute there. Yeah, so, one of the things that's interesting is that, cooperatives don't solve systemic racism. I mean, we are, we're really focused at Evergreen these days, particularly. We picked up a good amount of momentum on making sure that we're tackling systemic racism inside and out. And so, I think it's although you do have a voice in your company, if you're an employee owner, you still need to be sure to tackle the things that plague society, because we're still people. And the formation, the ownership structure of your business doesn't sort of make societal ills disappear, but it does give you a voice. And we were, we kind of, the Fund for Employee Ownership got started because we were at a Quality Jobs Roundtable, and everybody at the roundtable was pontificating about what a quality job was for a frontline worker, but none of them were frontline workers. And I just found it to be absolutely puzzling and somewhat disappointing, but also an opportunity to say, hey, let me share with you the Evergreen model. Let me share with you employee ownership. And, that kind of got us a lot of traction at the Quality Jobs panel. But, a quick story about just employees having a say and us guessing and them knowing. We had our first retiree from Evergreen Cooperative Laundry. He's retiring, and this guy's name is Charles Collin, great guy. We all love him. And we're saying to ourselves, what are we going to get Charles for his retirement? We're thinking a gold watch. And so we talked to Charles about a gold watch. He says, I don't want no stinking gold watch. I want a mountain bike. And so, really, when you empower the employees as owners, they tell you what they want, and their workplace becomes theirs. The workplace conditions become theirs and reflect really their wishes. And so, fully reflective, it's about wealth building, but it's also about empowerment.
It's brilliant, Brett. Great story. So Lisa, should I turn it back to you now so
Sure.
that we conclude on time? And I apologize to Diane and Allison. You didn't get the last word in, but you got many important words. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I also know that the idea for this panel discussion was to initiate opportunities for all of you to learn what resources there are. And so we want you to reach out to these partners. We want you to learn from them. If there are opportunities to collaborate, all the better. There was a ton of really valuable information in this program today. And I just want to thank all of our presenters. Incredible job at presenting this information. You were excellent. I also want to thank the Department of Commerce here in Washington State, who that's invested in WSMA to do this work. And we have in turn been able to invest in the nonprofits around the state. In this recent round, we were able to fund 46 nonprofit organizations. 52% of those nonprofits were BIPOC-led organizations. And what we know is that until the funding shifts, it's going to be harder for anything to shift. And this is just one part of that strategy that's important to us. And 30% of these grants went to rural communities, which we know are hotbeds of innovation and opportunity. We also want to just raise the imperative that nonprofit organizations, microenterprise development organizations, CDFIs, economic developers, cities, all need to be educated on cooperatives and the power of cooperatives. Because if that's not in our regular day-to-day jargon and lexicon, we're just missing a lot of opportunity. And so questions came up about the Flex Fund and other funding opportunities. I know many of us are going to take that next step. Finally, I just want to say, if you are a nonprofit or if you know nonprofits that are providing business training, technical assistance, or microloans to regular businesses or cooperatives, do reach out to me at WSMA, the Washington State Microenterprise Association. We want to engage you in our network. We are going to be putting on in the next couple of months this incredible tool that will enable any business in Washington State to put in their information, where they're located, what kind of business they're in, and up will pop the 5 or 8 technical assistance providers that are near them. So we want you to be in that network, and we want to work with you and support you in any way we can. So on that note, thank you, all of you. You've been fantastic. I look forward to learning from you. Feel free to call me or email me. I thank you humbly for this opportunity. And again, thank you to all our presenters.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.